Hello, good morning. Welcome to Saturday morning. We could be moving a step closer to seeing an end to single-use plastics in England. The government's launching a public consultation on banning items such as single-use plates, cutlery and polystyrene cups in an effort to eliminate all avoidable plastic waste. Sky's Aisha Zahid reports.
At Black Sheep Coffee, sustainability is at the heart of business. Everything they use here is compostable. Their mission is to keep plastic waste at bay.
The social responsibility and sustainability, we think that it goes together. We source coffee in a responsible way, and we thought that we had to echo that in all the areas in the company. Since day one, we've been using non-plastic materials. So if we started like that, I think for any company that wants to transition to non-plastic materials is going to be easier.
A ban on plastics is something people here welcome.
I avoid using it wherever possible, so I think if we didn't have it, then we wouldn't be able to use it, would we?
I think we've learned for a very long time now that single-use plastics stay in the environment for many, many years, and they release greenhouse gases.
I haven't been using those for a while now, and I think they're quite a waste. So yeah, let's just leave them.
With the launch of a public consultation in England, we could be one step closer to seeing single-use plastic cups, cutlery and plates banned, as the government pushes on with its battle against plastic pollution with the aim of eliminating avoidable waste by 2042.
Single-use plastics are a menace, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that we can get rid of those single-use plastics that actually are so difficult when you look at how they affect both the marine life, when you look at how they affect nature.
But not everyone agrees with a blanket ban. Caroline's business relies on single-use plastic. She says there's more that needs to be considered.
When something is going to be banned, what is the alternative? And what is the implication of the alternative? So if we turn to wood as an example, if you ban plastic cutlery and let's say you need something that's single use and you turn to wood, where does it come from? It's coming from trees. And if you look at COP26, one of the agenda points was deforestation.
While some businesses steam ahead, for others, moving away from single-use plastics will be a slower process. Aisha Zahid, Sky News.
To the US now, and President Biden has urged Americans to avoid violence and destruction. It's after a teenager who killed 2 people at a Black Lives Matter protest last year was acquitted of murder. Kyle Rittenhouse's lawyers argue that he was acting in self-defense when he killed 2 men and injured another in Kenosha last August. Well, troops from America's National Guard have been sent to the city amid fears that a verdict could provoke unrest. From Wisconsin, our US correspondent Mark Stone reports.
2 weeks of evidence, 4 days of jury deliberation, an 18-year-old in the dock for murder, and finally the verdicts on 5 counts in a trial which has gripped America.
As to the 5th count of the information Gage Grosskreutz, we the jury find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty.
Kyle Rittenhouse faced a life sentence, and this, the relief as he learned he was free.
There were times we doubted the case, there were times we were confident, and to say that we were relieved would be a gross misunderstatement.
Outside court, the divide this trial has exposed, loud and angry.
If I have a gun and you come up on me and you try to accost me, I'm going to use it. That's the way it goes.
Around the corner, the great aunt of Anthony Huber, one of the 2 men killed by Kyle Rittenhouse, and speechless.
Ma'am, can you give us a sense of how you're feeling?
But on the other side of court, Mr. Rittenhouse's family spokesman.
I believe it represents a chance for this country to have some discussions about how this spun so far off the rails when it was always about self-defense.
It's a trial which has touched on so many divisive issues: race, gun laws, disinformation, politics, and it's exposed such differing views about what is right and what is wrong. It's liberal against conservative, American against American, and it's a snapshot of these divided states. It all began last summer. Kenosha erupted in Black Lives Matter protests after the shooting by police of black man Jacob Blake. Kyle Rittenhouse travelled from neighbouring Illinois to counter the protests, claiming he was there to protect businesses and offer medical help. He was armed with an AR-15 assault rifle.
We don't have non-lethal.
So you guys are full on ready to defend the property?
Yes, we are.
Does anybody need medical?
This is the first man to be shot by Mr. Rittenhouse, Joseph Rosenbaum, part of the Black Lives Matter protest. Here, Kyle Rittenhouse is seen being chased by Mr. Rosenbaum. A man nearby fires a handgun into the air. Rittenhouse turns towards the direction of gunfire. Mr. Rosenbaum lunges at him, and Mr. Rittenhouse fires 4 times, hitting him in the head. He then runs down the road and trips as he's chased by 2 other people. Anthony Huber is seen hitting him with a skateboard. Rittenhouse shoots him from the ground. A third man, Gage Grosskreutz, is also shot and injured. The defence presented him as a man protecting a community from a mob and shooting in self-defence. And this was the portrait the jury believed. Absorbing it outside, the uncle of Jacob Blake, the man shot by police last August.
It was terrible, bro. I mean, there's nowhere in the world you can watch 2 young men get murdered on video, just like you saw little Jake get shot 7 times, and there's no justice.
And with such a different reflection, Mark McCloskey, who brandished his gun outside his home last year and now running for the Senate.
I think it's a great day for America. I think it's a great day for individual liberty.
Justice ran its course in court in Kenosha, but it is a justice that's caused a deep sense of American self-reflection.
And Mark has the latest now on the reaction to that verdict.
Well, just as this case has divided the nation, so too that thread runs through politics. President Biden released a statement shortly after the verdict came in, and he said, while the verdict in Kenosha will leave many Americans feeling angry and concerned, myself included, we must acknowledge that the jury has spoken. I know that we're not going to heal our country's wounds overnight, but I remain steadfast in my commitment to do everything in my power to ensure that every American is treated equally with fairness and dignity under the law. And former President Donald Trump, who of course has left it open as to whether he may well run for president again in 3 years' time, he released a statement too, the sentiment very different. He said, congratulations to Kyle Rittenhouse for being found innocent of all charges. It's called being found not guilty. And by the way, if that's not self-defense, nothing is. In terms of what happens now, well, I think in the short term, there is still concern that there could potentially be violence in this city and others across the country. Longer term, the question is, what precedent does this case set for others? And does it perhaps make some people who are allowed to carry weapons openly in some states, are they going to be emboldened to carry their weapons and potentially to use them?
That's Mark Stone there with the latest from Kenosha. Now, police in the Netherlands have fired warning shots and used water cannon on protesters after rioting erupted in the city of Rotterdam over new coronavirus measures. Hundreds had gathered to show their anger at government plans for a COVID vaccine pass and a ban on fireworks on New Year's Eve. The Netherlands imposed a 3-week partial COVID lockdown last week as cases surged. It comes as cases continue to rise across Europe. In Austria, a full national lockdown will begin on Monday, with Chancellor Alexander Schallenberg saying that it would run for a maximum of 20 days. The country has become the first in Europe to make COVID vaccines mandatory by law. And Germany has entered a nationwide state of emergency because of surging coronavirus infections. The head of the country's disease control agency said that regular medical care cannot be guaranteed anymore in some parts of the country because of hospitals and intensive care wards being stretched. And boosters and third doses will now show up automatically in the digital pads for people in England and from the 29th of November for people in Wales. Well, joining us now for more is Professor John Edmonds, who's from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and a member of SAGE. Good morning to you and thank you for your time here on Sky News this morning. Now, look, we're looking at the current situation in Austria and zooming in on the low vaccination rates. And it makes you wonder why so few people are taking up the vaccine, despite the government's public service messages and campaigns.
Well, it's a worry, of course, for them. It's a worry here as well. There's still many millions of people here in the UK who've not been fully vaccinated. So, you know, it's essential now. What you see now, particularly in Central Europe, with this very rapid increase in cases, you see the importance of vaccination, how critical it is that people who need their boosters should come forward as rapidly as possible and get vaccinated, and those who are still unvaccinated, and there are many, unfortunately, out there, should really come forward and be vaccinated as rapidly as possible.
How worried should we be here in the UK that something similar to what's happening in Australia, in Austria and Germany at the moment could be just a matter of weeks away from here?
Well, it shows how quickly things can go wrong, what you're seeing in Central Europe and many Central European countries, as well as in other countries around. So things can go wrong quite quickly. Frankly, here in the UK, we've had high rates of infection for many months now, so we're in a slightly different position to Austria and to Germany and so on, and that we've had high rates, fairly stable but very high rates for many months. And so I don't think things will happen quite in the same way here as they have done there, but it is a warning to us.
So what about the booster programme then? Let's take a look at that. Do you think that's going far enough, or are you concerned about waning immunity?
Yes, I'm concerned about waning immunity. I think it's pretty clear that immunity does wane. I'm sure that you still have retained some protection from the vaccine, but it's nowhere near as strong as shortly after after you've been vaccinated. And the booster doses, it's pretty clear, do give a very clear boost to your immune system, which may last for some considerable time. So I think it's really essential that the booster doses are rolled out as fast as possible. I think it's, from my own view, I think we should be probably looking to boost everyone who's been vaccinated.
Now, looking at our neighbours, they are obviously seeing a rise in cases, so they are imposing tougher measures. But our government obviously isn't following in that direction. It's now time for Plan B to avoid us getting into the same situation that they're in.
Well, the Plan B measures, we could have implemented them at any point because we've had high rates of infection for, as I say, since really June, July. And those Plan B measures might help somewhat at reducing infection. I think particularly working from home, the recommendation to work from home is probably quite an effective one. It's a government decision whether to take that step. Of course, they have to look at the potential effectiveness and measure that against the potential cost of some of those things.
Professor John Edmonds, thank you very much indeed for your time here on Sky News.
Welcome.
Well, let's see how the weather is shaping up.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, November has been very mild so far, hasn't it? But it will turn much colder during the weekend as northerly winds bring a risk of frost and ice. This will be a wet and fairly breezy start today for northern and western parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, it will be mild but mostly cloudy with some spots of drizzle in the west. And a band of rain will move southeastwards across Scotland, Northern Ireland and the Republic, reaching Wales and the Midlands by Saturday evening.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money is at increased risk because of a failure to conduct proper checks on Greensill Capital. That's according to a committee of MPs. Our political correspondent Rob Powell has more for us now. So, Rob, clearly this exposes a lack of scrutiny, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you'll remember Greensill Capital was in the news earlier this year because it was the firm that the former Prime Minister David Cameron worked for and advised, and Lex Greensill, the founder of that company, was also an advisor to David Cameron when he was in Downing Street. Now, David Cameron got into a spot of bother by trying to lobby ministers to get access for Greensill Capital, to get access to some of the COVID loan schemes. Now, while some of those were rejected, it did get access to some of those schemes and was allowed to essentially use government money to lend out to businesses to help them get through the pandemic. Now, the issue is that Greensill Capital went bust in March this year, and that means that hundreds of millions of pounds, around £335 million chunk of cash, that was loaned and guaranteed by the government could now fall back on the taxpayer to foot that bill. And what the Public Accounts Committee has been looking at, a cross-party group of MPs, is whether enough scrutiny was done on Greensill Capital before it was accredited as a lender. And this is what the chair of the committee, Dame Meg Hillier, has said.
At the beginning of the pandemic, the priority for all the loan schemes we've looked at for small and large businesses was speed over checks. So while some checks were carried out, what you might call the common sense ones, the smell test ones, were ones that didn't seem to take place from what we can see. So press reports, questions about what was happening across government. There seems to be very little sharing of the information about government, about concerns about, in particular, Greensill Capital.
Now, a lot of the criticism from the committee falls at the door of the British Business Bank, which is basically a government-owned bank that was responsible for checking out and vetting companies before it approved them as lenders. Now, the committee's report said that the bank's scrutiny of Greensill Capital, you can see Lex Greensill and David Cameron there, was woefully inadequate, and that the bank was insufficiently curious about reports that Greensill Capital was close to collapse. Now, the British Business Bank has provided a statement in response. It's referred to another report that was compiled by the National Audit Office previously, and it said that, in which it said the British Business Bank appropriately applied a streamlined version of its established process when it accredited Greensill Capital Limited as a lender under the COVID-19 business support schemes. A less streamlined accreditation process would have meant fewer lenders would have been accredited and fewer businesses would have received the critical emergency finance they needed during the pandemic. So it's sort of a familiar story along similar lines to the ones we hear about which companies are given contracts to do things like testing, valuable contracts for COVID testing, contracts to provide protective equipment. And it's essentially that balance between needing to act quickly in the midst of a public health emergency, but then also needing to be careful with what you're doing with taxpayer cash. And what this committee of MPs is saying in relation to Greensill Capital is that the British Business Bank got that balance wrong on this occasion.
The Dartmoor Line rail service between Exeter and Oakhampton is reopening to passengers for the first time in nearly 50 years, making it the first line to be reinstated under the Department for Transport's Restoring Your Railway initiative. Well, our correspondent Ivor Bennett joins us live now from Oakhampton. Ivor, good morning to you. Why this station?
Yes, welcome to Oakhampton train station in Dartmoor, where passenger services, a regular passenger service, has just resumed for the first time in nearly 50 years. I'm afraid I can't actually show you any trains because the first service has just come and gone. It's just departed back to Exeter, making the 40-minute trip back down the line. It departed around a minute ago, so I can't show you any trains, but I can tell you about them. The first one rolled in around 20 minutes ago. It was packed with lots of rail enthusiasts, young families out for a day trip here in Dartmoor, a lot of hikers about to go for a walk on the moors, which are literally just a stone's throw away. It's seen as a really significant moment for this local community. It's part of the government's plans to restore train lines and rail services that were scrapped in the 60s and 70s as part of the beaching cuts that were known as the beaching cuts. So a really significant moment. It is not at an insignificant cost, though, £40 million. And to tell us more about what that money was spent on, I am joined by Stuart Calvert from Network Rail. Stuart, thanks for speaking to us. So what is exactly involved in restoring a rail service like this? What was that money spent on?
So it's a mixture of engineering, a lot of engineering. Obviously, we've got a railway line here where we had to do a lot of drainage works. The most significant work was a lot of track renewal. And we set some records here, actually. It was 11 miles of track, which is 29,000 tonnes of ballast, 24,000 sleepers, and we relayed that in 4 weeks. So the whole engineering has only taken 8 months, just over 8 months from when we got funding. Drainage, radio systems, bit of signalling work, and then around the station here you can see the work we've done at the station, which is looking beautiful today.
And why restore this line? Who's going to be using it?
Well, look, there's people around here who have been campaigning for this line to be reopened ever since it shut in 1972. It serves the north of Dartmoor, which hasn't been served by rail. So it will serve 3 things mainly: leisure people coming to the moor, people commuting into Exeter or going into Exeter for shopping, and academic users, students and so on. So it serves all sorts of things, but it opens up a part of Dartmoor that hasn't been served by rail for a long time.
All right, thanks, Stuart. Now, this does, of course, come in the same week that the government was accused of breaking its promises on rail services in other parts of the country, in the north of England, saying it was scrapping the eastern leg of HS2. So I think a lot of people who are angry about that may well be asking why this line was restored, but nevertheless, this is a significant moment for the local community here.
Ivor, thank you. Now, as a result of climate change and the loss of habitat, the koala population of New South Wales in Australia has reached a tipping point. A new report is warning that the animals could be extinct in the state by the year 2050. Siobhan Robbins has this report from Sydney.
Okay, 835 grams.
Weighing less than a bag of sugar, koala Joey Dara is having a checkup.
Look in your mouth.
She and her injured mother were rescued from a Sydney roadside a month ago. Climate change and rapid urbanisation are putting the whole species under threat, with warnings they could be extinct in New South Wales by 2050.
This is unprecedented, and we're in tipping point times. And more trees are being cut down, more areas are being built up. We're having huge fires, and all these things eventually will have major impact, not just on koalas, but all the other animals that live in the same habitat that they do.
Do you know if this koala is injured?
No, I don't. So the first point of what we do is we assess to make sure the koala is fit and fine and okay without any injuries.
Volunteer Tracy is responding to a growing number of koala call-outs.
The adrenaline kicks into them and they just want to get away from whatever it is that's injured them.
The young koala is worryingly close to a busy road and houses.
It's not rapid breathing. Rapid breathing would tell me it's heat stress and also that there may be an injury.
It appears unhurt, but the team will patrol to make sure it stays away from the traffic.
This is a perfect example of the pressure that our lives put on koalas' lives. The more we encroach in their territory, the higher the risk. It's estimated every year 4,000 are killed by dogs and on the road.
Climate change is another threat. Wildfires killed thousands of the state's koalas in 2019. Sydney's last healthy and thriving colony live in the trees you can see here. But developers have been given permission to build thousands of homes nearby.
Why build on an area which is so close to a very active koala population?
So the project is really focusing on developing on areas that have been cleared for some time, and as a result of that we're able to then enhance and protect areas of existing habitat to provide more habitat and better connections for the population.
The state government and developers say they're committed to protecting koalas with inclusions like animal underpasses, fences and conservation zones. But campaigners are scathing.
If you were trying to wipe out koalas in New South Wales, you would do exactly what the New South Wales government is doing. You would find the habitat where they are surviving and succeeding, and you would start to declare that as housing.
In the last 3 years, it's feared New South Wales has lost around 40% of its koalas. Unhindered, drought, disease and development could mean they disappear completely. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News in Sydney.
All right, let's see how the weather is looking today.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, here's the good news. November has been very mild so far, but, and there's always a but, isn't there, it will turn much colder during the weekend as northerly winds bring a risk of frost and ice. It will be a wet and fairly breezy start today for northern and western parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, it will be mild, but mostly cloudy with some spots of drizzle in the west. A band of rain will move southeastwards across Scotland, Northern Ireland and the Republic, reaching Wales and the Midlands by Saturday evening. Ahead of that, much of England and Wales will be mostly dry and mild, if rather cloudy. Sunny spells and scattered showers will follow for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it will turn noticeably colder here. The cold air will feed further south overnight as the rain band continues southwards. Many inland areas will have clear spells with showers mainly around the coasts.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
With us this morning to review the papers are broadcaster and writer Edward Adu and former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson. Good morning to you both. Looking lovely this morning. Let's just get straight into it. I must say, Dawn, I'll start with you. Colin Pitchfork, who is going back inside. Tell us why.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the splash on today's Daily Mirror and stories also inside in several other newspapers. And it's a horrible story, really, and it's not great to be talking about it, but this is slightly good. Anyways, double child killer Colin Pitchfork has been recalled to prison just 2 months after release. I'm just reminding people that he was jailed for life in 1988 for raping and strangling two 15-year-old girls. He was released on a very, very controversial parole in September, and has been evidently, according to people in the safe house, the parole board house he was living in, was seen approaching young girls, which is a breach of the very, very strict conditions he was supposed to be living under, which is why he has been sent back to prison, Vanessa, and hopefully we'll I've got to say it, we'll never see the light of day again. I mean, there was so much controversy when he was released from prison because he'd been refused parole in 2016 and 2018. And there was a lot of complaints about why he was allowed out this time, because he doesn't seem to be safe. And this seems to be proving that he cannot be trusted back on the streets. You know, well, they were young girls. And that's what he was seeing. I mean, he has some of the strictest curfew conditions in the country. I mean, most people have 7. He had 35 additional ones on them. So I think, you know, it's an awful story, but I just, you know, I'm glad it's back behind bars and that young girls now are safe. And, you know, it's just, well, good riddance to bad rubbish.
Absolutely. And Edward, it does beg the question, why was he even released in the first place?
No, of course. And I think this is where possibly an investigation or questions need to be asked. As Dawn was saying, you know, parole refused a number of times, and for him to be on the streets and obviously what he's been doing recently, it questions the whole system as to, you know, why he was allowed, why he was set free in the first place, and what was done in order to lead up to him being released. I think loads of questions have to be asked, and so that it doesn't happen again. And obviously, in terms of rehab for him and other prisoners of that ilk, that certainly needs to be questioned as well. I mean, the whole thing, it's an absolute farce. Absolutely.
Edward, I'll stay with you because this story is just growing and growing. It's not going to go away until we see Peng Shuai. What's going on here?
So Peng Shuai, so this is the story about the tennis player, the allegation of sexual assault by a Chinese premier. So it's the world-famous tennis player who no one seems to know where she is. Now, there's reports saying that she's she's at home, she's safe, and there will be a statement made in a couple of days. But the question is, I mean, it's caused lots of the American government, the UK, basically lots of governments have said, where is she? We want to get answers. This is not right. So for her to be, in a sense, we don't know. We can't speculate, but it seems that she is somewhere. We don't know her state, but according to sources from the Chinese government who have said she's in a safe place. It's just a worrying story. And also, I think the kind of top line of this story, as soon as the allegation was made, again, we can't speculate. It was taken offline and she disappeared.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we heard those statements of her saying, oh, I'm absolutely fine. It's OK. Don't worry about me. Are you buying that, Dawn?
There was this weird picture that was issued of her cuddling a cat, wasn't there? And it just, none of it makes sense. We do know, and I don't think it's controversial, that China do not have a great history of human rights, do they? You know, she's a top-ranked player in the women's doubles. I mean, she won titles at Wimbledon in 2013, the French Open in 2014. She's also participated in 3 Olympics, making her disappearance a very prominent issue, bearing in mind that the Winter Olympics are due to be held in Beijing in February. So it is, you know, you can't help but worry about what has happened to her and sort of like pray she is safe. But it's, you know, her disappearance will be increasing pressure on China ahead of the Games, and surely that must be a good thing.
Absolutely. And I'll stay with you, Dawn, because let's talk about Amazon, which usually hits the headlines. Now, this is not a good one. So 10-hour shift stuck inside a cage, and this is Amazon slaves. And then there's a picture, of course, of Jeff Bezos, who continues to make a lot of money, so much so he popped into space just a few weeks ago, didn't he?
Well, quite absolutely. I mean, this is an interview, a very shocking interview with a lady called Olivia. She's in her 30s. She's remaining anonymous for obvious reasons, and she was doing shifts in Amazon in the run up to Christmas. Very busy time of year, obviously. And, you know, she was doing 8 months of grueling shifts, earning £9.70 an hour. And, you know, working in a cage, Vanessa. She had what they describe as a workstation, but it's basically you're in a cage and you're staring at a computer and you have to meet so many targets. Your loo breaks are monitored. You have to get permission to go to the loo. You're filmed every step of the way of what you're doing. It just sounds horrendous. And the problem is with lockdown, Vanessa, we've all got hooked on ordering stuff online. And as much as, you know, we all think, right, okay, Amazon, they're not really a great company. I mean, bearing in mind, the UK outfit pays less than £4 million corporation tax, despite 1.9 billion sales rise last year. So it's not great, and you really try and stop yourself to ordering things from Amazon. But we're all addicted on it thanks to blooming lockdown. So I'm going to try now and use my local high street and local shops more, because you can't have people working in these conditions in 2021.
Absolutely, absolutely, and awareness of that as well. Now, Edward, I'm going to come to the area of music and Ed Sheeran in particular, and he's hit back at accusations that he appropriated grime music to boost his career. And you just kind of think, you know, he's just a great singer doing great things. And he recently did some collaborations with some Western African singers for Ghana in West Africa, and it was celebrated. Can't he just be celebrated?
That's the problem. I think for some artists, if you jump on a particular genre, for whether it be grime or whether it be hip hop or drum and bass or any other genre, and if you happen to be white, some people say, oh, well, it's cultural appropriation. I think this is an accusation that has been made here. And Ed Sheeran has called out the artist Wiley and said, look, he's made accusations in the past about this. Ed Sheeran, he was nominated for a MOBO. He won the Black Power list for One Extra in 2014. As you rightly said, Vanessa, he is a great musician, and in what he's done over the years is he's just super talented. I don't think whether he's made grime music or any other genre, that shouldn't be questioned. I think some people tend to sort of put this on the table because they might be jealous, they might be angry of what he's done. I think as an artist, he should be celebrated. And, you know, talking about cultural appropriation when it comes to music, I mean, if that's the case, we'll be here all day. Musicians should be allowed to do what they do. I mean, there's a classic jazz musician, Bob James, who's made the finest jazz music ever. And, you know, when people found out that, you know, Bob James was white, they didn't question it. They celebrated his music. I mean, we could name numerous white artists who have made some incredible music, which is, in a sense, is push black music. And in a sense, they would say they're just doing it because they love and appreciate the genres and the music and what they do. It's about it's one of these stories which I'm sure it will surface again, but it's just annoying that we're even talking about it. Music is music.
Absolutely. I can think of UB40 and the song Red, Red Wine, which we will not be having this morning. We will leave it for the evening. Put it down, Dawn. What do you make of it, Dawn? You know, this whole argument of cultural appropriation.
Oh, well, look, Vanessa, I'm just so, look, you know, as Edward's just said, it is music. It is one of the joyous things that unites us all. We should all celebrate it. I mean, you know, I'm a huge fan of the Rolling Stones, and the Rolling Stones, you know, sort of like, you know, they popularised blues music, which we know came from sort of like, you know, black musicians. And it was like, what is wrong with, you know, paying tribute to other artists, to enjoying it? That's just, why does everything, Vanessa, these days have to come down to division and hatred and everybody having a go at someone about something or other? Everyone's permanently offended about something these days, aren't they? But this is just music, and you know, let's just go and have a dance and enjoy ourselves.
Absolutely, and if people keep going on about it, I'm going to sing, okay? And nobody wants to hear that.
We want you to sing. Vanessa, we want you to sing. Please.
Don't you dare.
You can do it this morning. Just do it.
Honestly, it's a threat that I'm putting out there. One day I will belt something out, and you know.
Go for it.
And just very quickly, Dawn, Benny Hill, some of his, you know, some of his past work, his past work obviously is coming to the fore. Tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. The Benny Hill Show is back. This was obviously hugely popular in the 70s. It's and it was sort of semi-cancelled because of woke culture, and it's that word again, I know, but I mean it was deemed to be offensive, but I mean it's just fun. I loved it. I know Edward loved it as well. He got told off for actually watching it. And you know, the thing I really liked about the Benny Hill Show, it's coming back, by the way, on what's TV channel is it coming back on? I can't find that.
That's TV. I think that's TV.
That's the one. That's it.
Back. You know, the thing I really liked about it, and Edward won't like this bit, is like, you know what? And, yeah, there were scantily clad ladies in there, but they were all gorgeous. You know what? But they were the ones in charge. They made the men look pretty silly in that. And Vanessa, I think that can't be a bad thing, surely.
And, oh, my goodness, Edward, we don't have time to go into detail, but the story in The Guardian is that chocolate is good for us. It's good for the heart, so we can't complain.
Dark chocolate is good. Dark chocolate is good for the heart. So apparently a specialist he's endorsed this and said it's better than having wine, and he backs coffee as well. And I can certainly endorse that, because there's a particular brand, and because we're on Sky News, I'm not going to mention it, but I tend to have at least a box every day, which is not good, but I still manage to look slimline, which is fantastic. So please, if you can get it, I wish I could tell you the brand. It's brilliant. Dark chocolate is good for you.
Edward, thank you so much. See you soon.